Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, or good evening, as the case is, and welcome to a special edition of the Daily Friend Show, because, of course, today we have two of the heavy hitters of the Institute of Race Relations. Let me start with Dr. Anthea Jeffery. Anthea, how are you today?
Well, thank you, Nicholas. Glad of the opportunity to speak on this important issue.
Definitely. And, of course, the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations, Dr. Frans Cronje. Frans, how are you?
With Anthea, who has been so very right on this for a very long time.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to hearing your thoughts. So we are recording slightly early because, of course, the government has decided to bless us all with stage 4 load shedding, which is causing problems. So I hope that our listeners do indeed have electricity to listen to this podcast or watch this video. Right. So, of course, today we are talking about the great threat to civil liberties and property rights in South Africa, and that is the expropriation without compensation moves by the state. So, Anthea, let's just get started with a bit of background. The idea of expropriation without compensation, where did it come from?
Well, the expropriation idea certainly began at Polokwane in 2007 when Jacob Zuma became the ANC president. And at that conference, the ANC decided to get rid of the whole notion of willing buyer, willing seller, and to move towards a new expropriation bill. And we saw the first version of that bill in 2008, which tried to ask the jurisdiction of the courts to decide on compensation or the validity of an expropriation. And strong objections from the IRR and others caused the government to pull back. We got another version then in 2013, yet another version in 2015, which actually passed through Parliament. But at that point, I think the ANC was already deciding that they wanted expropriation without compensation. The South African Communist Party said the expropriation bill, as it then was all very well, but they needed to have stronger state powers. So that bill was withdrawn, while the ANC in 2017 at the Nasrec National Conference resolved to amend the constitution to allow expropriation without compensation. So where we stand now in terms of that decision is, first, we have an ad hoc committee of Parliament, which is deciding on a constitutional amendment bill. And in addition, we have a new version of the expropriation bill, which is being put together by the Portfolio Committee on Public Works and Infrastructure, is busy proceeding as we speak through various public hearings around the country.
So, Frans, do you have anything to add to that before we get a little bit more into where we are at the moment?
No, go ahead. My bit is coming.
Okay. Right. So there's been a lot of discussion now about disputes between the ANC and the EFF over pieces in this legislation, because, of course, the two of them need to cooperate together in order to do the constitutional amendment. Anthea, what's going on there? Should we take those disputes seriously? What exactly is being disputed between the two?
Well, there's not really much of a dispute at all. What has, I think, taken the country rather by surprise is that the constitutional amendment bill, which began by saying that a court would decide when there might be nil compensation paid on the expropriation of land and the improvements on it, and also saying that Parliament would decide the circumstances when nil compensation might apply. That's the bill that went through the public participation process. And then suddenly at the last minute, 31st of May, the expiry of the mandate and the duration of the ad hoc committee, suddenly the EFF pushed for a land custodianship clause, but the ANC pushed for it too. So between the two of them, they both want that bill to be amended to oblige the state to take measures to achieve custodianship over all land, and then to provide access to people on an equitable basis, with obviously the state deciding if the state has custodianship of all land in the country. And there's been an outcry, and in response to that outcry, the ANC, particularly President Cyril Ramaphosa, is really trying to pretend that there's a big divide between the ANC and the EFF on this issue. But the reality, if you look at the wording that was put forward by the ANC and then the wording put forward by the EFF, there's almost no difference in the wording between them at all. And when President Ramaphosa says that the ANC is keen to give ownership to Black South Africans, this is completely contrary to what it has been saying for many years, that it's for the state to have ownership or control of the land and for the people to have access. It's also contrary, of course, to a state policy. This is the state land lease and disposal policy of 2013, which says in so many words that the state will retain ownership of any land acquired for redistribution for an initial period of 30 years while it's leased to some land reform beneficiary, and then another period of 20 years where there's a successor lease, and that after half a century, it may be possible to consider an option to buy for that land reform beneficiary. And that policy is rigidly applied. It's the reason why the ANC refused to sell to David Dugassi, a very successful Limpopo farmer, the land it had actually promised to transfer to him in 2002. It felt so strongly about not giving him ownership that it went to court and fought it very strongly until the Pretoria High Court told it that it could not expect a 77-year-old man to have a 50-year lease and wait for ownership until after that.
Right, it's complete madness. So one more thing I just want to go over. You've talked about it on the show before, but just could you quickly clarify what exactly it means when the state takes custodianship of land? Is that land nationalisation? What's the difference?
It effectively it is, but what the ANC is trying to do is to draw a very technical and artificial distinction between expropriation, defined as the taking of ownership of property by the state, and custodianship, which was really where the state takes control over property, and that they are trying to claim that there's a big difference between the two. But critically, what they're trying to achieve is that no compensation should be due at all, because it's widely accepted around the world, as the ANC knows very well, that expropriation must be accompanied by the payment of compensation. You may, as an exception, develop situations where that does not apply, but that's the general rule. They are trying to argue that when they take custodianship, that's not ownership, that's something different. So there's no question of expropriation. So there's no question of compensation being payable at all. And it is an entirely artificial distinction. And this was made very clear by the Pretoria High Court in a court case a number of years ago, when a mining company lost an unused mining right. Effectively, it moved into the custodianship of the state. And the company that had paid R1 million for it said, we'd like compensation for what the state now has. And the Pretoria High Court agreed. It said all the powers and competencies of ownership have moved from this company to the state. And it doesn't matter whether you call the state's powers ownership or custodianship, the effect is essentially the same. And so the Pretoria High Court said it's still expropriation and compensation should still be paid. But the Constitutional Court, unfortunately, took a different view, and it's that which the ANC is now trying to leverage and turn into a general principle of law.
So, Frans, this seems completely crazy. Outside of the public participation process, effectively, it looks like the EFF and the ANC are cooperating to nationalise all land at the stroke of a pen, which would, of course, reduce the number of black landowners, which is what they claim to care about, to zero.
Yeah.
Who could have seen this coming?
Nick, Anthea Jeffery saw it coming. She called it precisely as it happened. And she's done so for a very long time on this specific question, going back the better part of a decade. We've both written recently on the Daily Friend about some of those calls. There's a great newspaper report of 7 years ago in the Independent Group, where we make exactly this point. Then it's not land reform, it's not going to be expropriation, it's going to be custodial taking, it's going to go through Parliament. And in that report, we've linked it on the Daily Friend, you can go and read. Agri-SA says we're completely wrong. They say it won't be constitutional, it would never pass, and they say hopelessly naively, it would cause such damage that the ANC would surely not do something like that. And I mean, this was after we'd already seen a lot of the damage being done. They also said the courts would never permit it when the precedent was already there. They have been hopelessly naive throughout this. Then it quotes a chap by the name of Ben Cousins, who's a professor of something related to land and politics at one of our country's rapidly deteriorating universities. And Cousins accuses us of scaremongering. And he says nothing of the sort will ever pass through South Africa's parliament. It's going through the parliament now exactly as Anthea predicted. So take her very seriously in what she says. She's the best at this. There's no one in this class of thinking and analysis of where the ANC is going. So Anthea is very good. First thing to say, a few other things to say with that. One is that this is not about land. This is not a land bill, and it hasn't been that from the beginning. A government that cared about land issues, and there are historical injustices to deal with, would have long since created policies and circumstances that would allow black people with an interest in commercial farming to access the financing to buy their own businesses and become successful commercial farmers. That is not the ANC's objective. It is afraid of black landowners because of the independence that they would wield in any future society. This thing is beyond that, nothing to do with land reform. The ANC is held together by its cadre deployment network. And how that works is if you're a loyal cadre of the movement, now that things are so dreadful and falling apart, if you just remain loyal and you don't question the leadership, you will be rewarded with access to cash via the state. And that can happen through getting a job as a clerk in the municipality at a very low level, and you can get a tender or give a tender to your friends if you're a minister, as recent events.
As well as expanded public works program and jobs for the lowest on the scale.
Yeah. Now, that system holds the ANC together. Without that, internally, the ANC begins to crumble, fight with itself, and that exacerbates the external assault on the party because its support is declining very quickly, and it can really lose its way and lose control of the country. So what the ANC needs to do is it needs to pivot the cadre deployment model away from dependency on taxpayers' money, which the party's been pilfering for 20 years, and onto sources of private wealth and capital. And the reason is that taxpayer funds are busy running dry as the economy is growing so slowly, partly because of legislation of this nature. And it's using the cynical manipulation of the historical denial of property rights to blacks in South Africa to justify granting itself powers, the precedents around which it will later apply to other sectors of the economy. One of those is the healthcare sector, where the national health insurance policy is an attempt to nationalize private healthcare funds and resources and apply them to the state. Another one that I think may be coming, and I think this because Anthea briefs me on these things, is a national social security fund of some sort. So you pool all pensions and savings in the country in one fund, the state would run it, and then it would pay everyone an equal amount of pension. That sort of thing's coming. And it wants access to those pension funds in addition to that to plug expenditure gaps in the state as a consequence of the deficit in order to finance the cadre networks and prevent them from falling apart. And that's why it needs these policies. The same reason the EFF needs them. And the two are working in unison. Think of the EFF as the spear point and the ANC of the shaft behind it. Now, Mr. Ramaphosa's denials. Here a most important point must be made. The ANC does not wish to destroy the capitalist economy or send the private sector running for the hills and exiting. It wants to do something more sophisticated. It's trying to harness those resources to its revolutionary agenda and to feed its deployment networks. If it moves too fast and it frightens industry too much and it frightens business and business begins to fight back, the scam does not work anymore. It needs to take organized business along with it. Now, inside the ANC, there's a well-established negotiating tactic around its tactics and strategy documents, that you can advance these ideas, the revolution, when you meet with no resistance. As soon as resistance is encountered, you must stop at once and even back off to lull your adversary, your target, your intended victim, into the false sense of security, and then you can advance again. As the ANC was passing these custodial moves through Parliament, and our and Anthea's credibility was rising because we'd called this and been told we were wrong, and we were absolutely right. Ramaphosa stands in Parliament and says this is not our intention. It's absurd. It's completely at odds with the drift of policy in the ANC for a decade. It's completely at odds with the statements he has made on several occasions. And it's completely at odds with what his own committee, that is very loyal to him in Parliament, proposed in black and white in writing just a few days previous to that. And the reason he backed off is because for a fleeting moment, organized business started to have a bit of a wobble. A Discovery said they would not allow their resources to be nationalized. That's after the proposal was made. And which is, you feel like you must say, welcome to the world that the rest of us live in after that group's denials of the risks over time. In any case, Adrian Gore and his colleagues' statements are moot if this stuff passes through Parliament. It won't be up to them whether their assets are nationalised or not. BUSA, the organised business entity, I think it was BUSA or BLSA, one of the two, said that this is most alarming because all assets are up for grabs, not only land, which was in and of itself a disgraceful statement, the idea that you should write off the land as some sort of appeasement to government. But they said all assets are on the line. And again, you feel you've got to say, welcome. We told you this 10 years ago, and you said it was complete nonsense, and now you're facing it. And I think Ramaphosa and his party realized that for the first time, the threat was taken seriously. And therefore he backed off, and he'll stay backed off. And if you want to beat the ANC, you fight it the whole time. You push back constantly because it's deeply ingrained strategic sense will be you back off and back off when you face firm opposition. And that's where we are at the moment. If the opposition persists, we can win this thing. But if we move back into the sort of appeasement position that Agri-SA has been in the main with government on this for some time and business throughout, then the ANC will again begin its march because it needs to obtain these powers to fund the cadres. Otherwise, its future dominance in South Africa is very much in doubt. Nick.
So, Anthea, just before we move on to talking about the ways to defend our rights, do you have anything to add to what Francis just said?
No, I just want to underscore the point, the importance of keeping up the resistance. It has made the ANC draw back. The intention now with the ad hoc committee in giving it until the end of August to complete its work and to fill up that period with a lot of reassurances from Cyril, the reformer, supposedly, will be to try and persuade business again and others that they panicked unnecessarily, that it's all fine and we can relax and the ANC will not do anything damaging. So it's a deliberate strategy to buy time for damage control. And if we care about property rights and the prosperity of all South Africans, we need to keep up the resistance right to the end of August.
Yeah, that's right, Nick. Nick, can I jump into that? Anthea's exactly right. We've fought this thing since 2008. We fought it since before people knew there was a thing to fight. We've been fighting custodianship since before people knew what it was. And there's still people today who don't know what it is. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. And we've battered it away time and time and time again. And the way we did that is to build an increasingly effective lobby over time to place the ANC, to skewer the ANC at every opportunity and the government and in front of any audience where the truth about its expropriation intentions or custodial or regulatory taking intentions, whatever you wish to call them, in the end you suffer the fate of losing your property and your assets, that they were put under intense pressure. And over the 10 years, I'm very confident that 80% plus, I think it's probably more than that, of the material that was published to challenge the ANC and put it under pressure came out of work that we did or projects that we engineered. Pressure breeds change and reform. In the battle of ideas that we fight, the side that wins is the side that injected the greatest volume of compelling argument into the public domain. It is the most powerful thing you can do now, because you do know what the ANC's response is. I saw it in another case, I can't talk about it. I saw it in another case this morning. The ANC's asked to negotiate with someone who's taken a very strong line on a very important issue and was very worried about doing so. And has now said, please, can we talk? We must maintain the pressure long enough that the ANC either backs off from this entirely, or that it dies before it's able to act on it. So you must survive longer than the ANC survives now. And that's possible, because I think the ANC's end could be this decade, the way things are going at the moment. And so I'm confident that if groups that have invested in these kinds of projects and lobbies continue to do so, and if more join, we can definitely hold the line on this. You know, we're now since 28, we've been fighting this specific thing for 13 or 14 years. We haven't lost it yet. What happens if it goes through and the ANC obtains these powers? Well, then we change the fight onto two fronts. Then it's more in the courts. There are so many procedural problems with how the ANC went about this, that I think the possibility is there that we can buy time in the courts, not to defeat this entirely. The courts are too unreliable. But you can buy time for the political and other processes that I talked about earlier to play out. And time is now a very great asset. The longer we have, the less time the ANC has, the more likely we are to prevail. But I'll say something else, and it sounds like I told you so, and it is that, and there is a place for that. Is that 10 years ago, we told farmers and others that this is coming, and you better get your plan Bs in place. You better diversify yourself, your family, your assets, your interests, so that if this happens, it's not going to take you down with it. If you have listened to that advice, and there are a minority of people who did, you are now in a very robust position. And none of this, if it plays out, is going to sink you entirely. It will do harm, but it won't be the end. And you can now commit the resources and the time that you can spare to helping us defeat this so that we don't get there. If you're one of the many people who did not listen to what we had to say and dismissed it, and listened to the B-grade analysts who told you it could never happen and it wouldn't, look at the state of the country today. If you were one of those, it's becoming late to make your plan B, and you better fight twice as hard as the people who saw this coming, because if you don't, it's going to take you with it. Your medical aid will be gone, your pension fund will be gone, the property and assets that you own vanished, the South African stock market tanked, the currency running off to whatever level against the American dollar. This is the territory in which we are in now. And if the ANC, as corrupt and incompetent as it is, achieves these powers, and we can't block it in the next 5 years through various mechanisms, then the consequences for you, if you've got no options outside of South Africa, become extremely serious. Nick.
So I think there's something that I want to talk exactly about what ordinary people can do to join this fight, because the comments underneath will be filled with people saying, there's no hope, we must just leave, there's no chance that we can do this, what can I do as an ordinary person? So I guess my question really then is, what can you, if you're sitting there at home watching this, what can you do, Frans, to sort of help?
Okay, you go to irr.org.za. On that landing page, you find our campaigns. Click through to the one about stopping EWC. Fill in that document and support us. Number one, it's critically important. We're not getting any support for these campaigns of at all substantial nature outside of thousands of ordinary individuals. Number two, if you're not yet a friend of the IRR, then join us. There are now many thousands of those friends, and they are the key reason why we are still in this business and are able to continue. Friends contribute to us amount of, it averages under 100 Rand a month, but multiplied by thousands of people, it becomes substantial. So do that. The third thing that you need to do is become informed about what's going on. Go to sites like the Daily Friend, read the analysis, Google Anthea Jeffery, see what she has said over time, and share that information in your own community so that more people become aware and join the broader lobby to defeat this. We'll win this if we get enough people behind that lobby, supporting it, both in terms of small contributions and sharing the information in their circles of influence, so that an awareness of the full intentions of the government triggers sufficient public concern and then a response that the government is forced to back off and either abandon this completely or lose an election before it is able to implement and adopt it. These are actual physical steps that you can take now to invest in your future in the country and in the future of all South Africans. And I'll say one more thing there for you, Nick. It's a very liberating, kind of energizing thing to do. There's nothing worse than now, a day like today, the electricity's off, the health minister's gone for staff pilfering the money, the vaccination program. We finally exceeded the vaccination rate of Afghanistan and Somalia, so I suppose that is something. The economic outlook, what it is, etc. To sit there and to watch this is a terribly debilitating, disempowering thing. Take those first actual steps to getting into this fight yourself. It is hugely empowering. And when you start bringing in your peers and friends and associates and family to do the same, and you take those first actual steps towards building a much better future, you'll find that your entire outlook on the thing changes, and you'll know that at the very least, regardless of what happens, we might very well win, but we'll know that we did everything we possibly could to prevent now catastrophic situation from emerging as a consequence of this draft legislation.
Anthea, any final thoughts on this from you?
Yes, perhaps just as a final encouragement, do remember what happened this week. The ANC drew back in the face of resistance. And that's what we must remember the ANC will do.
Very good.
Each and every time. If you appease it and indulge it, it will bite you. If you fight back in a firm and respectable, I mean, we don't call people delinquents and things, as Nedbank's chairman once did. If you do compelling fact-based analyses in front of influential audiences about the damage this will cause, the ANC will back off and it will not act on these powers.
Excellent stuff. So just a reminder to everyone, please go to our website, rr.org.za, click the Join Us button, or click the Campaigns button and go to the EWC campaign. We've also got a number of other ones there at the moment, which I think you may be interested in supporting. You can also, as it says on the banner behind me, SMS your name to 32823 and sign up to become a friend of the Institute. Because, of course, a question we often get is who funds you? And for the most part, the answer is you guys. People who watch us, people who read us, people who like the research and the advocacy that we do. That's what keeps us alive and able to be independent from any sort of, the dominating control. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. This is, of course, the great big civil rights and even political freedom fight of our time. So please do take it seriously. Please spread this video, share this video, subscribe to this, share the podcast, all that good stuff. We really appreciate your support, and keep the flag of liberty flying. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of The Daily Friend, everyone. Have a good day.